For from 3 sides the sea penetrates into all parts of the country. And while it accustoms men's eyes to greater acuteness and their minds to higher enterprise, never ceases to excite their fancy for the sea, which in regions where no eyes binds it during the whole course of the year, effects an incomparable closer union between the lands than is the case with the inhospitable inland seas of the north. If it is easily agitated, it is also easily calmed again. Its dangers are diminished by the multitude of safe bays for anchorage, which the mariner may speedily reach at the approach of foul weather. They are further decreased by the transparent clearness of the atmosphere, which allows the mariner at daytime to recognize the guiding points of his course at a distance of as many as 20 miles, and at night spreads over his head a cloudless sky, where the rising and setting of the stars in peaceful tranquility regulate the business of peasant and mariner. The winds are the legislators of the weather, but even they in these latitudes submit to certain rules, and only the winds are the legislators of the weather, but even they in these latitudes submit to certain rules, and only rarely rise to the vehemence of desolating hurricanes. Never, except in the short winter season, is there any uncertain irregularity in wind and weather. The commencement of the fair season, the safe months, as the ancients called it, brings with it an immutable law, followed by the winds in the entire archipelago. Every morning the north wind arises from the coasts of Thrace and passes over the whole inland sea, so that men were accustomed to designate all the regions lying beyond that of the coasts as a side beyond the north wind. This is the wind which once carried Miltiades to Lemnos, and at all times secure advantages of such importance to those who commanded the northern coasts. Often these winds, the Etesian, for weeks together assume the character of a storm, and when the sky is clear, waves of froth appear as far as the eye can see, but the winds are regular enough to be free from danger, and they subside at sunset. Then the sea becomes smooth, and the air and water tranquil, till almost imperceptibly a slight contrary wind arises, a breeze from the south. When the mariner at Aegina becomes aware of this, he weighs anchor and drops into the Piraeus in a few hours of the night. This is the sea breeze sung of by the poets of antiquity, and now called the Embates, whose approach is ever mild, soft, and salutary. The currents passing along the coasts facilitate navigation in the gulfs and sounds of the sea. The flight of migratory birds, the shoals of tunny fish reappearing at fixed seasons of the year, serve as welcome signs for the mariner. The regularity in the whole life of nature and in the motion of air and sea, the mild and humane character of the Aegean essentially contributed to make the inhabitants of its coasts use it with the fullest confidence and live on, and with it men soon learn all the secrets of the art of river navigation to an end, but never those of navigating the sea. The differences between dwellers on the banks of a river soon vanish by mutual contact, whereas the sea suddenly brings the greatest contrasts together. Strangers arrive who have been living under another sky, and according to other laws there ensues an endless comparing, learning, and teaching, and the more remunerative the interchange of the produce of different countries, the more restlessly the human mind labors victoriously to oppose the dangers of the sea by a constant succession of new inventions. The Euphrates and the Nile from year to year offer the same advantages to the population on their banks, and regulate its occupations in a constant monotony. which makes it possible for centuries to pass over the land without any change taking place in the essential habits of the lives of the inhabitants, of its inhabitants. Revolutions occur, but no development, and mummy-like the civilization of the Egyptians stagnates. Enshrouded in the valley of the Nile, they count the monotonous beats of the pendulum. But time contains nothing for them. They possess a chronology, but no history in the full sense of the word. Such a death in life is not permitted by the flowing waves of the Aegean, which as soon as commerce and mental activity have been once awakened, unceasingly continues and develops them. Lastly, with regard to the natural gifts of the soil, a great difference prevailed between the eastern and western half of the land of Greece. The Athenian had only to ascend a few hours' journey from the mouths of the rivers of Asia Minor to assure himself how much more remunerative agriculture was there, and to admire and envy the deep layers of most fertile soils in Aeolis and Ionia. There the growth of both plants and animals manifested greater luxuriance, the intercourse in the wide plains, incomparably greater facility. We know how in the European country the plains are only let in between the mountains like furrows or narrow basins, or as it were, washed on to their extremest ridge. And a single passage from one valley to the other led over lofty ridges, which men were obliged to open up for themselves, and then with unspeakable labor to provide with paths for beasts of burden and vehicles. The waters of the plains were equally grudging of their blessings expected from them. The waters of the plains were equally grudging of the blessings expected from them. Far the greater number of them in summer were dried up rivers, sons of the Nereides, dying in their youth according to the version of mythology. And although the drought in the country is incomparably greater now than it was in ancient times, yet, since men remembered the veins of water of the Ilissus as well as of the Inachus had been hidden under a dry bed of pebbles, yet this excessive drought is again accompanied by a superabundance of water, which, stagnating in one place in the basin of a valley, in another between mountains and sea, renders the air pestiferous and cultivation difficult. Everywhere there was a call for labor and a struggle. Everywhere there was a call for labor and a struggle. And yet at how early a date would Greek history have come to an end had its only theater been under the skies of Ionia? It was, after all, only in European hell, that the fullness of energy of which the nation was capable came to light on that soil so much more sparingly endowed by nature here. After all, men's bodies received a more powerful and their minds a freer development. Here the country which they made their own by drainage and embankment and artificial irrigation became their native land in a fuller sense than the land on the opposite shore, where the gifts of God dropped into men's laps without any effort being necessary for the attainment. Thus, the special advantages of the land of Greece consist in the measure of its natural properties. Its inhabitant enjoys the full blessings of the south. He is rejoiced and animated by the warm splendor of its skies, by the serene atmosphere of its days, and the refreshing mildness of its nights. His necessaries of life he easily obtains from land and sea. Nature and climate train him in temperance. His country is hilly, but his hills, instead of being rude heights, are arable and full of pastures, and thus act as the guardians of liberty. He dwells in an island country blessed with all the advantages of southern coast, yet enjoying at the same time the benefits proper to a vast and uninterrupted complex of territory. Earth and water, hill and plain, drought and damp, the snowstorms of Thrace and the heat of a tropical sun, all the contrasts, all the forms of the life of nature combined in the greatest variety of ways to awaken and move the mind of man. But as these contrasts all dissolve into a higher harmony which embraces the entire coast and island country of the archipelago, so man was led to complete the measure of harmony between the contrasts which animate conscious life, between enjoyment and labor, between the sensual and the spiritual, between thought and feeling. The innate powers of a piece of ground only become apparent when the plants created for it by nature drive the fiber of their roots into it, and develop on the site so happily discovered, in the full favor of light and air, the whole fullness of their natural powers. In the life of plants, the scientific investigator is able to show how the particular components of the soil favor each particular organization. In the life of nations, a deeper mystery surrounds the connection between a country